Hey everybody, Spyros here, and I've got a super quick favor to ask you guys. Creative Live has open auditions for instructors, and I am auditioning. I want to teach at Creative Live, and I need your help. All you got to do is click this annotation right here, which will take you to my audition video, and once you're there, just leave a comment on that video telling the folks at Creative Live what you like about me and my videos and how I help you learn photography. And that's it. And then when I get on Creative Live, you'll get to watch the workshop for free. For those of you who have already left a comment, thank you so much. It means the world to me. Now let's get to today's video. Hello photographers, my name is Spyros Heniadis, and this is where I answer your photography questions and we learn about photography together. This is our third video in our series on composition, and if you haven't seen the other videos, you can click this annotation right here to see all of our composition videos. And today, we're going to be asking the question that every photographer should be asking themselves when they're shooting photos. And that question is actually pretty simple. The question is, why am I taking this photo? Because as photographers, we have this tendency to act before we think when we see something that catches our eye. And what we end up doing is grabbing the camera and taking the photo. And it looks something like this. Oh, that's pretty. And when we take a shot like that, the brain is on autopilot, and the resulting photo doesn't really convey the feeling of awe or joy or beauty or whatever it was that caught our attention and inspired us to take that photograph in the first place. This happens because when the brain is on autopilot, you're operating without thinking. Your brain tells your body to take a photograph, but you're not thinking about what's in that photo. In order to create a photograph that communicates the beauty and the awe and the feeling that we feel at the moment that we are actually inspired to take that photograph, we need to put the thought back into the photography process. And this brings us back to that question of, why am I taking this photograph? Because when you stop to ask yourself that question and you take that moment to actually figure out what it is that motivated you to take the photo, now you know what you're trying to communicate in your photograph to the viewer. So let me show you what I mean. Here is a photograph from a trip to Boston, Massachusetts that my wife and I took in 2012. And I got this shot because I knew exactly what I wanted to capture and communicate in this photo. Now, I had asked myself that question. I asked, why am I taking this photo? And the answer was because these buildings are freaking enormous. With that answer, I recognized that I was experiencing awe and wonder at the sheer size and scale of these buildings that were towering over me. So this is just one example where I was able to use what I knew to communicate the feeling I felt at that moment in my composition. Now, I want to show you another example. In this photo right here, I again asked myself that question. And this is the same city. It's another shot from Boston, but the answer to the question this time was because I feel trapped. So I understood that now what I wanted to show was these buildings and how cramped everything could feel, and how at times I felt like I was trapped in that city and the walls were closing in on me as if I could not escape. So this process of asking yourself the question, it's such a simple thing to do. It just takes a moment, but it allows you to think about and try to understand what you want to capture in your photo. What you do need to understand, though, is that this is sometimes a process. You're not always going to be able to answer the question every time you ask it. In fact, when I was in Boston shooting these photos, when I first got to the city, I didn't already have this question answered. I asked myself that question and I saw all of this stuff in the city and there's so much to shoot there. And my answer was, I don't know. And when that happens, when you don't have an answer, just shoot, just take photos. I did that very thing. I just let myself shoot. I knew that I was attracted to the buildings, so I was shooting the buildings. And as you can see here with these shots, I got some decent shots. I was looking at some interesting things and I got some okay photos. But what's more important is that by shooting and just letting myself take photos, every time I took a photo and tried to make a shot work, I was getting closer and closer to understanding the answer to that question. So when I did get to the point where I could answer that question, I was able to take those shots, the shots that I really, really love. So one of the things you need to be prepared to do is take a lot of shitty photos, because this will happen to you, I guarantee it. And when you don't know the answer to the question, you're going to take photos that don't communicate anything very well. You're going to take photos that suck. And that's okay. In fact, it's a very important part of your process because it helps you figure out the answer to the question. And it doesn't matter how long it takes you to figure it out either. In the case of my trip to Boston, it took me, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour to really start narrowing in on what it was I wanted to photograph. But there are photos that it took me months and months to get to figure out exactly what it was I was trying to capture and communicate. So it can take time, but it doesn't matter how long it takes, because when you get it, when you have the answer to that question, that allows you to compose a photograph that nails it, that communicates exactly what you want to communicate. And you know the photo I'm talking about because you've taken these photos already, maybe on purpose, maybe on accident, but you've captured that photo that perfectly expresses what you want to express, that exactly allows the viewer to feel what you were feeling in that moment. And that photo is the photo. Now, in the first two videos, we talked about the visual path and using perspective to create better compositions and more compelling photos. This got to the way the brain looks at your photograph and the way your brain processes a photo. And that dealt principally with arranging things. And if you remember from that first video, I talked about how composition really breaks down into two different things: how you arrange things in your photo and those visual elements that you actually arrange. What we've talked about today with this question is something that you ask yourself before you start creating a composition. And you might be wondering why I didn't start the video series with this question. I waited to bring this up though for a reason, because for the rest of this video series, we're going to be talking about the visual elements. These are line, shape, color, and texture. And these things are the tools we have in the toolbox to create a composition. But the thing about using these tools is you need to know why you're taking the photo so that you can use these tools to augment your composition. Again, let me show you what I mean. If we look at this photo again, I knew I wanted to convey the feeling of being trapped. And knowing this, I deliberately chose a perspective that got in really close on these buildings, making them feel stacked on top of each other. And this is a view that we do not normally see, because as you're standing on the street, the normal human view looks something like this. And this doesn't really make you feel trapped. Certainly this street is crowded, but it's basically a regular street scene in just about any busy city. But if we go back to the shot we're discussing, this feels like the buildings are closing in on you. Now the visual path for me in this shot goes like this. The heavy angled line from the building on the right is what pulls me into the shot, and then all of the vertical lines from the building behind it help push me up and into the photo. And you'll also notice that all of those vertical lines on that building are leaning slightly to the left, and the building on the far right is leaning really hard to the left. So all of this left-leaning stuff pushes me to the left in the photograph, and it makes me feel uncomfortable because it feels like these buildings are falling over. And as you look at this shot, I deliberately didn't include any sky because open sky gives you room to escape. It makes you feel like there's some place else that you can go. Now, all of the vertical repeating lines in this shot also give a feeling of strength, and I know this because I understand the elements of design. This is what we're going to be talking about. And I knew that I wanted to convey the feeling of being trapped, so I deliberately used these vertical lines to impart this feeling of overpowering strength. I also know that angled lines create energy and motion in a composition, and this makes the eye want to travel, and that our brains like repetition, especially when there's some variety to that repetition. So all of these repeating lines also help create energy and movement through this photo. Now the feeling of energy and movement conflicts very heavily with the way I have these buildings stacked on top of each other and the way that everything is closed in with no sky or empty space to escape into. And these lines, these visual elements, the contrast, these are all of the things that we're going to be talking about. And I used these to deliberately craft that composition to make it feel like you were trapped in this photo. But it was because I knew what I I wanted to communicate that I was able to do that. And this is why it's so important for you as a photographer to be asking yourself, why am I taking this photo? It's a very simple thing to do, but it will have a profoundly positive impact on your photography. All right, guys, that's all I've got for you this week. If you have any questions on today's topic, asking the question, let me know down in the comments below. And while you're down there, let me know, are you already asking yourself, why are you taking the photo before you take it? And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. If you really like this video, why don't you do me a favor and share it with your friends? But you know what? I don't care what you do, as long as you get out there and take some damn photos, and I'll see you next week. How's my CeeLo impression? I was like, why? Why?